How movies tell you where to look. A distant figure grows inside empty space. Leaves block the view, then frame a face. The camera lifts from an object to its owner. A cut reveals the target of the gaze. A body hides the reframe, then reveals someone else. From above, separate people become one system of attention. A tiny eye movement becomes the event. A reaction arrives before its cause. Without the original sound, these images are already choosing what matters. Movies ration information through size, position, movement, contrast, and time. A wide frame lets us inspect a world. A close frame makes us search a face. And when one image follows another, the order itself can create a question, an answer, or an expectation. Start with size. The figure stays near the center, so the movement is easy to follow. But the growing scale changes the figure from a distant mark into the subject of the shot. A low camera position elevates the person, but the surrounding architecture still keeps the body small. Angle and scale work together without saying exactly the same thing. Here, the camera closes the distance slowly. The expression changes very little, but the amount of facial information keeps increasing. Pressure can come from our growing access, not only from a larger performance. At this scale, a hand and an object occupy almost the same image. Rotation, edge presentation, and a small regrip become separate events because the frame has removed nearly everything else. This silhouette approaches through a doorway. It becomes larger, but the face remains unavailable. The image gives us increasing presence while continuing to withhold identity. Size is also relative inside one shot. The foreground figure is larger and sharper. The background figure is smaller and less available. The frame creates an information hierarchy before either person does anything dramatic. Composition decides how that information is arranged. This man remains centered, while birds cross several layers in front of him. The moving environment keeps testing the stability of the human figure. Here, the foreground does more than decorate the image. The birds repeatedly block and uncover the subject, creating depth while controlling when we receive a clear view. The foreground clears, but it does not reveal a face. It reveals the object on the chest. Depth can redirect attention toward the detail that becomes available next. In this three-person arrangement, architecture and light divide the frame into readable zones. We can understand the relationship among the bodies before we know exactly what any of them is thinking. Empty space is also active. The subject's direction points into an unoccupied part of the frame, making that absence feel like withheld information rather than unused background. From above, individual faces matter less than the pattern they form. Head direction, spacing, and the delayed appearance of the mechanism turn the group into a map of shared attention. Once a face fills the image, much smaller movements become legible. The veil stays nearly fixed, so the slight movement of the eyes becomes the shot's clearest change. Watch the order here. The gaze leaves, turns towards another person, and only then does the smile settle. What we call one expression is actually a short sequence. A face also contains several channels. The eyes can remain intense while the mouth stays quiet. Close framing lets us compare those channels instead of reducing the face to one label. In this moment, the eyes begin withdrawing while the mouth is still active. The parts of the performance do not change together, and the frame gives us enough access to notice the difference. Hands can direct attention just as strongly as eyes. This brief action establishes a destination, hides part of the object, completes the placement, releases contact, and transfers color into the new position. Blocking can even remove performance from the frame. The face begins centered and available. The turn makes it partially disappear without a cut. Sometimes the actor barely moves while the costume carries the visible change. Here, the mask's surface keeps the image active. Camera movement changes not just what we see, but how we gain access to it. Here the push travels through foliage. The obstruction first denies a clear view, then becomes a frame around the glowing face. This vertical movement begins with the object and ends with the person. The camera does not discover new action. It changes which part of the same action receives priority. Here a moving body crosses close to the lens. During that obstruction, the framing changes. The body is both part of the scene and a practical cover for the reveal. A slow move can create pressure without visible instability. The face remains comparatively controlled, but the camera keeps reducing our distance and increasing the amount we are invited to inspect. A doorway provides a natural threshold. Crossing it enlarges the figure and turns simple movement into arrival, even though the image continues to withhold facial detail. Foreground movement can also reveal through accumulation. Each crossing briefly removes access, then returns the subject with a different scale or spatial relationship. The shot develops without needing a cut. Editing can perform the same redirection instantly. We first receive a person's downward attention. The next image specifies its target, a hand and an object. The cut converts a general look into precise information. Cuts do not always announce themselves. These closely matched images maintain position and lighting so well that several edits feel almost continuous. Replaying them exposes how cutting can preserve attention instead of interrupting it. Here, the reaction comes first. We see the people register something before the wider image explains what they are watching. That order changes explanation into anticipation. Direction also connects separate shots. The bodies continue traveling along the same line, so the pieces feel spatially continuous. Then a wider view restores the larger map before the action spins it. This cut changes scale rather than direction. Human bodies brace against the disturbance. Then the landscape reveals the event at a much larger level. The second image enlarges the meaning of the first. Editing can guide attention through several stages: a group response, an object insert, then a return to the speaker. Each cut answers the question created by the previous image and then creates another. Watch the repeated opposing close-ups. This short scene gathers many of the same controls at once. It begins with a stable, centered figure, while bright foreground movement repeatedly interrupts our view. A second person enters with stronger color and broader movement. One body remains comparatively restrained, while the other closes the distance. Composition, costume, gesture, and blocking begin defining the relationship before the edit isolates either face. Once the scene begins alternating close-ups, the repeated framings become measuring devices. We can compare sustained eye contact, lowered gaze, head position, and the return to the exchange because the camera keeps giving us similar visual conditions. Then a departing body passes across the foreground. That movement temporarily controls our access to the seated figure, creating a wipe inside the space rather than an abstract transition imposed from outside it. No single choice carries the scene. Centering establishes the baseline. Depth creates visual interruption. Color separates the bodies. Blocking changes their distance. Close-ups enlarge facial evidence. Editing determines when each response becomes available. Size selects the level of information. Obstruction controls access. A cut turns a look into a specific object. Composition keeps one figure stable. Hands transfer attention through contact. A reaction shown before its cause makes us wait for an explanation. Direction connects separate spaces. Scale connects human effort to environmental consequence. A sequence of cuts can move attention through an entire group. The images did not just show us what happened. They decided what mattered.